I'm Matt. I've got a quarter of a century of experience in the technology industry. I'm your fractional CTO, and I save companies $250,000 every year with technology initiatives. Are you overwhelmed with compliance acronyms like HIPAA, PCI, and GDPR? You're not alone. Even small businesses must pay attention to these types of compliances, even if they're not in that specific industry. PCI is the most broad, encompassing acronym you're going to want to know about. What is compliance and why does it matter? Well, compliance is maintaining a level of security to data that's defined by federal agencies and governments to make sure that they protect their citizens. There are real risks involved. We want to mitigate those risks. The risk will never be zero, just like I talked about with cybersecurity, but it can be closer to zero than it is right now. We can always improve. There are three main risks. The first one is fines. You can be fined by your local or state or federal government. The second one is lawsuits. People can file a lawsuit if they find out that their data has been breached. Sometimes that's a class action lawsuit. Sometimes that's a single or very few entities that are filing that lawsuit. I'm not an attorney, but all I know is I don't want to deal with attorneys, so I will do whatever I can to help my clients maintain compliance with those regulations. And third is a damaged reputation. We have all heard of data breaches, and the reputation of that company that was exposed to that data breach is always diminished or tarnished after a breach has occurred. There are three main buckets where these compliance come into play and these regulations are set. The first one is medical. That's very specific to medical information. HIPAA is the main one in the United States, and that stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Basically what that says is you have to maintain privacy with patient data. That's all it is, privacy. We want to make sure that the people that get the information are supposed to have that information. So if a bad actor gains access to your system, can they glean some patient data from the data that's available to them? Hopefully the answer is no. There are simple things that any HIPAA compliant system will do. It will encrypt data, it will limit access to people who don't need it, and it will maintain a level of security that is a higher standard than most systems. The second one is logistics, and that covers also some data privacy as well. This is intended to protect information on shipments, customers, or drivers by managing it securely. There are some transportation regulations that come into play, and this applies especially for cross-border transportation. The main act in play here is the CTPAT, the Customs Trade Partnership Against Terrorism. So if you know in the bank industry, to open an account, you need to verify who you are and that you need the account to avoid money laundering. Same way, we want to make sure that transportation isn't used for terrorist activities. And the Partnership Against Terrorism is a voluntary program that people are encouraged to participate in. The third thing is in fintech, it's the PCI compliance. This one is the most critical because it's the most encompassing. Maybe not critical would be the word, but it's the most prevalent. Anyone who's taking credit card payments or bank payments, ACH, needs to be PCI compliant. You must secure the payment information and the systems that run those systems. You should not be storing credit card information anywhere. One client of mine uses paper for people to renew their membership. We're working on it. They also have a spot for a credit card number and the expiration date for people to mail in their credit card number. I don't think that's the best way to handle that. I've talked to them several times about how that's not PCI compliant, and that's not really a good approach for them. It opens them up to huge liability. There's another aspect of that. It's the AML, anti-money laundering, and that's what I mentioned before about opening a bank account. They want to verify who you are and that you're authorized to open an account in this country and that you're not going to be doing it for nefarious things such as money laundering. So those are the three areas. Now let's go through a three-step framework on how we can be more compliant with these types of regulations. Step number one is set up your foundation. You need to first identify the regulations you need to support and comply with. If you are not storing medical information or patient data, you don't need to be HIPAA compliant. If you're not in logistics, you probably don't need to worry about logistics compliance. If you don't take credit card information, you probably don't need to worry about PCI. Once we determine the regulations we need to comply for, then we can have a plan. Part of setting that up is to determine who owns that piece. If the CFO or the person right below that, director of finance or whatever you're calling it, if they're responsible for PCI compliance, they own it, and then they report back to whoever up the chain. Let them take responsibility for it. You tell them what. And then another part of that is mapping out where data is stored, if anything. For instance, in the PCI compliance, if we are storing credit card data, that's a huge no, even if it's encrypted. But what we can do is work with our payment gateway system. And if we need to, for instance, have a recurring payment, we take the credit card information, pass it on to them through their API, and then they can give us a token back, and we can store that token, and then we can recurringly bill against that token. And that is way more secure because we don't ever store the credit card information. We're a pass-through all through SSL with the credit card information, and then we store that little token, and we can just repeatedly bill the person every month or whatever with that token. That also requires a security piece on our end so that we can maintain who we are and that we're sending it from the correct account, meaning our payment gateway account, and then the payment gateway can then authorize and process that transaction. A little down in the weeds for that one, but sometimes that's really valuable for you to know exactly what goes into it. Step number 2, implement essential compliance actions. I kind of went through that with PCI just a second ago. So we need to develop and document our processes. How is this going to happen? How are we going to do it? With the credit card information, we don't ever store credit card information, ever. And then we train our staff to avoid accidental violations. For instance, that company that has their members send in paperwork with their credit card information, first thing is to take that form down, that PDF, or say that they can even call in with their credit card information, or provide a way for them to pay online. So that way, when someone sends in a credit card on the form, they can contact and say, this is not the way we do it anymore. Another part of that is evaluating vendors and partners. People are going to be your biggest loophole into opening security risk. Your employees and your vendors and partners typically care a little bit more because if they mess up, their job could be on the line. So there's already a goal to do well. Vendors, it's hit and miss, right? Most vendors, if they are thinking right, they'll think big picture and they will want to do a good job, and they'll want to maintain security and privacy. Some just don't know. There are some quick questions you can ask them. If they're implementing your e-commerce site, you can say, okay, are we going to be PCI compliant with this approach? That's a simple question. Or if you're in medical, are we going to be HIPAA compliant? We need to make sure our system is HIPAA compliant. In step 3, monitor and review continuously. This is not a one and done thing. This is not, we threw a touchdown pass and now we won the game. It's a consistent, iterative process. Schedule periodic audits or reviews for ongoing compliance. This is really important. Some people will get a third party to do the audit or maintain compliance. Stay up to date on regulatory changes. This is a little more difficult because it's hard to know when something changes. So an outside person who's an expert in that area would be a good resource for that. And then the last little bit is to update your policies regularly and document any gaps that you may have so that you can address those. Put them on the project board. Let's say prioritize them. Let's say we're going to handle this Q2 of next year because it's really not a huge risk, or we need to address this next week because it is a massive risk. And that's the beauty of it. It's all about priorities. With anything in life, it's all about priorities. Even software projects or getting healthy or anything, all about priorities. If you set the right priorities and they align with your goals, you'll achieve them because you'll work towards them. Hope you found this valuable. Feel free to book a call with me. In the description below, there's a link. I'd love to help you out with your compliance. I'm exceptionally knowledgeable with PCI compliance. I've done that a lot over the last 25 years. And as always, subscribe, share, and like the video, and thank you.